Pietro has 30 seconds.
Yes.
So, on the ballot, there was a place for moderator, and there wasn't anyone. And previously, we had Paul Giuliani, and all I recall him doing is what Libby just did, call the meeting to order and cause the election of the chair. Is there any other job for the moderator?
Yeah, thanks for calling my attention, because I noticed that too, and I was going to bring it up, and then I forgot about it. Do we have a problem that we do not have a moderator? Although I
think it's a statutory requirement.
wrote
I think
all
we
it's
have to
really
have it
in.
by statute.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's only if we are ever to have a
That's one of
district
the
meeting,
write-ins, right?
Mhm.
we would have
Might
to have the
been-
moderator.
There might be.
But I don't think there's really any reason that we would need to have
Yeah.
That's
a
possibility.
district meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we should clarify
We
with
did.
John whether we have a
Jim,
moderator.
Andrew wrote somebody in.
I wrote somebody in.
Okay, so we should see, we might have written in the
We
same
might have a
person.
moderator.
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
you guys,
you know,
this
so we
is
should
really
check in-
cool.
we should check in with,
Hey, she did my job.
we
Do you
should check
need a
in with the
minimum number
Montpelier
of votes?
clerk's office.
Yeah.
Right, I think there's a minimum
Like,
number of votes.
You have to
you
have
One
the,
vote
the
might
number of
not be enough.
petitions.
Yeah.
Would 2 votes be enough?
No.
It wasn't a coordinated campaign.
I
The
doubt
number
we
that you have to
right,
be on the,
right,
to
right.
petition yourself to be on the ballot,
Probably
you
not.
have to have that threshold.
What is that?
So you have to have
So it's gonna
20.
be like
Right.
30 or
So when you
something.
had to get
30
a certain
now.
number of petitions
Yeah.
to get on the ballot, it's that same number to be written in.
So my guess is there
That's- then
isn't.
we
so-
don't.
Yeah, that,
Yeah, I think we don't have a moderator.
30 of your best friends didn't do the same thing you did.
No.
That might be the question for Pietro.
Yep,
Whether
Heather, do
we-
you know?
Whether we need a moderator, and if we,
and to have our act together to ensure that we don't find ourselves in this embarrassing pickle
Yeah.
next year.
So
Yeah,
that's
So I know I'd
But
asked,
just appoint somebody?
it's not the most.
Yeah, now
embarrassing
you
pickle
can
I've
appoint
been in,
somebody.
No,
Of all the jobs to not have somebody,
Right.
the
Moderator
moderator is
don't need one.
probably.
no, Jen, we've been through several consecutive dumpster fires, that does not, I didn't use that language at all.
Yeah, this is low on the list of embarrassing pickles. Okay, so I will reach out to Pietro and find out, and then we can appoint someone that he might be able to I think that's all the positions. We do not have, we have a treasurer elected by, and we did have a candidate there. I think we're done. Thank you all, and welcome new old members.
I was gonna say, Jim,
Huh?
do we need to appoint members to the standing committees?
Well, that's a good question. We probably do.
I hadn't thought about that until we started this process, but I think we're supposed to appoint members to the standing committees. So the budget committee, the finance, policy, and superintendent evaluation committees.
And negotiations.
That
I
is a
think we're supposed to.
good point of order, parliamentarian. So,
It is, yeah.
It's
yeah.
very parliamentarian of you.
Because we had said even
Policy.
if we weren't,
So there's
essentially,
5?
if we weren't in negotiations, the committee doesn't do anything. So, but it is a standing, because we would always have at some point in time.
So which of those are
I have
negotiations?
budget,
handle
no, budget finance is one.
Budget finance, yeah.
Negotiations, policy, superintendent evaluation.
Are we going to maintain the
Negotiations.
policy committee permanently?
I said
or-
that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Or maybe I didn't say it.
And we
but-
had a transportation committee, but I don't think
Are
we
we
need to
maintaining
reappoint the
policy
transportation
permanently,
committee.
or just appointing them?
I think we had said we
We
would,
call it
because there would be
standing committee.
revisions and monitoring, and
I think it's a good idea.
in the future, it wouldn't be as intense as it is right now, but the goal would be that the policy committee would, if nothing else, just be doing some record keeping and, should we say, weeding and refreshing.
As a point of process, are we able to do a blanket,
That's what I was wondering.
yeah, proposal of reappointing all of the same members who were on those committees to them in one vote?
That
I
sounds like.
believe so.
I like it.
As long as
I
everybody
like
knows
it.
what we're voting on, yes.
Yeah.
So I motion that we reappoint all of the members who were on the standing committees prior to town meeting day to those same committees post town meeting day.
Second.
Second, but can I make a discussion point?
Sure.
The reason it popped into my mind is because when we were talking about the superintendent evaluation committee at our last meeting, we had talked about
We
Tina.
Tina, so she's on.
Okay. So that is Yes, we're all clear then.
So she's included in this vote.
The
on that
superintendent
committee.
evaluation committee.
So we have a second?
I did.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. So I think we are reorganized. And Libby and I will make a note to just reappoint the clerk. In order for me to reappoint maybe we can just do a blanket motion reappointing Lisa to everything she's been appointed to.
Yeah.
Okay. Because she's on some committees too.
I think you can appoint her, she just can't talk, or she
Yeah.
can't vote on
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Well, we'll just do a blanket one. My guess is that it won't get called into too much question. So public comment? Great. So the consent agenda. Do you have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Actually, Jim,
Do
can
you
we
wanna take
just,
the lead off it?
can we just pull the bond capital plan bid?
Yep.
Just for the sake of getting an overview on the scope, and I don't anticipate that'll take very long, but I think it would be helpful. Yeah, I don't know if I defer to you, but maybe just pull that in after the learning focus right there, since he'll be here, so that then he can leave it full time.
Okay.
So that's my motion, is to pull that.
So consent agenda with that item table or pulled.
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of the approval of bond and capital plan bid item.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then Andrew, you wanna, is the other Andrew probably the best person to answer that? Okay. Johnny?
Sure. So the first thing we can go over is the actual approval of the bids. We had 3 bidders, Spates Construction, Russell Construction, and EF Wall. You'll notice that we had pretty good bid results, pretty tight, which is always encouraging on a set of drawings. You'll also notice that we did not go with the low bidder. We went, because we were within 1% of bid results, we had by statute the ability to pick between 2 contractors. In the end, we went with EF Wall for one primary reason, in that when we put together the bid documents, we had the base bid scope, which we'll go over, and then we had alternates. They were fundamentally add alternates. We had a couple of delete alternates that were kind of a doomsday. If the bids were way over budget, we could at least take that deduct, get the project rolling, and kind of figure things out. We didn't want to be in the position we were with the playground last year, trying to figure out things on the fly, wasting time, eating up time. But fortunately, the bids came in. They were under our target budget, and when we put those ads back in, which I'll discuss in a moment, there's also not only the cost of those ads, but schedule. And EF Wall was able to accommodate all our ads without adding any time to our schedule. Our schedule is such that we will begin, haven't had this conversation with the contractor specifically yet, but the bid documents and the expectation is that April break, we're actually gonna start ripping and tearing here at the high school, working down at the auditorium and one of the locker rooms. Work through to the start of school, and the target is to have substantial completion by the start of school here at the high school. So again, we were within that 1%. It was the schedule that tipped us towards EF Wall. So that was our recommendation, that we go with EF Wall.
Sorry, how can we start the auditorium work before All-State Festival?
There is a plan that needs performances that would take place. They've all been adjusted with Kiana and other folks who usually traditionally you will use the auditorium in the spring. We've either moved the schedule up to before April break or moved them down to UES to do performances down there for other accommodations. We have taken a former storage room and made a temporary locker room here at the high school, so that's how we're gonna be able to take out one of the locker rooms. And again, that's our planning on paper. Once we sit down with the contractor, they'll have better suggestions as to how we attack this.
And what's the time frame to actually get it done?
Again, substantial completion by the start of school. I can guarantee you that we're not gonna turn the key on the start of school and there's not gonna be a contractor wandering through, but the goal is that we can use locker rooms as locker rooms. We can use weight rooms as weight rooms. I can guarantee you that they're not gonna be, they're gonna leave here on the third week of August and we're not gonna see another contractor here. We will. But use the spaces as intended.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Great.
So with regards to this, any questions on the bid results and why we ended up where we did? So that was our recommendation on that. With regards to the scoping of the projects, let's start at UES. UES, we're very fortunate. On all of our projects, we've kept about a 10% contingency on construction. We were fortunate at UES that through all the demo, which is always the scariest part of construction, we didn't run into any big issues out there. So we still have a pretty good chunk of contingency left to be spent out there. We're more comfortable about saying, okay, we can actually afford to do some of these things that we pulled back to get that bid in line. Right now, our landscape architect, SE Group, is working with ECI on putting features back into the playground. In another few weeks, we will have a better plan that we can actually, I've got some plans in my office, but I don't want to show them to you until we know, yes, we can afford that, yes, we can afford that. But it's looking much more to the someone who hasn't been involved with the project intimately. It's going to look like what was promised, and that's the goal here. That we may have tweaked the thing here or there, but the amphitheater will be in the project. The lower playground will have equipment, and it will be closer to what the expectation is. As well as taking into account that we will have areas that if next year, if we aren't able to afford every piece of equipment that we want, that we'll have the space allocated that we can get that there and we can end up where we intended. Here at the high school, the general scope of the project here at the high school is the auditorium, which includes improvements to the sound and lighting systems. We were able to afford, or I shouldn't say we, you, the public was able to afford upholstering of all the seats. Refinishing the ceiling, windows, draperies, some curtains, and a new control board for the audio at the back of the stage for sound and lights. So that was great. New public restrooms in the lobby by the gym. A weight room, which is currently upstairs back behind the basketball court. Is now going to be on the ground floor for accessibility in the back corner with additional windows, so you can actually look outside and see whether it's raining or snowing or what, with actually a window from the gym into the weight room, so you can see people are in there and that you've got this great new feature. And then 2 new locker rooms with support space for coaches and referees. We also have a new training room that'll be going in out on the backside of the basketball court. At Union, the interior work at Union, we're finishing up the vestibule now. Down there's a new elevator that's going in, renovation of the last 2 gang bathrooms down there, and a new fire alarm system and electrical work feeding from the panels to new sub-panels, which is going to be a great asset down there. Also, we bundled into this, much to Grant's chagrin, was we crossed the streams of funding. We included in this bid number here the work at the capital work at Main Street Middle School, which includes 2 new restrooms, gang restrooms down there on the down by the gym and up on the 3rd floor. Again, those are different funding, but for the economies of bidding, and we bundled them into this bid, and Grant will do his accounting work from there. New, here at the high school, some mechanical work, air handlers, we're gonna use the same system, silicone coating system we used on the roof membrane this summer here, over the gym and auditorium here at the high school. The system seems to be working well.
Does that mean the whole roof is done now?
It is, but it's a coating system, it's not a new membrane. So it was a system that was endorsed before I got here, and you know, the best way would have been to strip it all down, all the insulation off, and put a whole new membrane and all that. This coating system of existing membranes is something that's become in vogue, more widely acceptable in the last several years. The idea of taking a membrane that is generally in good shape, to tear it all off, to landfill it, when you can actually roll on coatings that you use the existing as a substrate, has gained popularity. Northern New England and New England were generally the last to get on board with those types of things, but it's becoming more acceptable around here. So I do not get the I would not have the expectation that this is a 25-year roof. I think we've probably gotten 15 more years out of these roofs. That's my guess.
Do you have any idea what the cost differential is roughly?
Oh,
Between doing something like that versus?
that's a lot. It's
Yeah.
probably 4 times as much, especially here where the roof deck, we weren't able to fasten into it, so we truly would have had to take all the insulation off of our roofs and adhere the insulation, because we can't mechanically fasten it. So it was a huge savings. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but multiples of what a new system would cost.
Bridget?
Is there still gonna be the new classroom space as part of this, the high school work, the new classroom for the arts that's?
Yeah, oh yes,
gonna
the
connect
green
to-
room, yes, there's a new classroom space, green room on the backside by the auditorium. So, we're hoping, and again, these numbers came in, you know, we worked really hard, with the administration and the faculty who use these spaces and what their needs are, and we really worked together to focus in on what the most important things were and what the biggest bang for the buck was. And our hope is, just like we did with the playground, is we're gonna be conservative now, such that when we get done, when we know we've got all those basics covered, that we'll have a little bit of leeway to sort of add some things back in. You know, I'll say, I'd love to put a little bit of money into that lobby. I mean, people are gonna be coming in to spruce up that lobby for as modest as we can, to really make the experience great. We don't wanna have people come in and get into that lobby and then have to go to those nice spaces. But let's make sure we get those nice spaces the way we want before we start worrying about those things.
And just so everyone knows, I represented the board on the auditorium committee, and Lisa represented us on the wellness.
Gymnasium
Yeah.
side of things. So if you have any more questions.
Do you,
Thank you.
what does the board think about, and it might even make sense to do it in the fall, once these projects are done, but then we're gonna have more capital projects. We created a capital fund to deal with. What do people think about a walkthrough of the Montpelier buildings one afternoon to look at the work that's been done and what's good, because we're making decisions on these things regularly, and although we're not making decisions based on the aesthetics and based on our anecdotal experiences, I think it is helpful to see it. And even those of us who do have kids in the schools, they're only in certain schools, so we don't see everything. I think it could be helpful to see, well, have Andrew walk us through and say, well, these are our needs here, here, and here. These are examples of them, and this is what we've done here, here, and here, kind of thing.
We did have a walkthrough of the high school stuff, and it was helpful.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth
So it would be
yeah.
nice to have one after it's done.
Libby and I
Agree
discussed
that.
this, and
Good way.
I was probably a little bit more ambitious than I should have been, but I would like to, in the near future, whatever that means, I would like to give you guys an annual report
Oh,
on
great.
your facilities, where they stand, what they're, and in a format such that it's not reinventing the wheel every year, it's updating the information, because,
So we could plan ahead, what a novel idea.
right.
That'd be awesome. Thank you for your work on this.
But let's get the things built first. I'm slowly chipping away at it, but I don't wanna make any promises quite yet until Libby tells me when to make that promise.
Well, Libby and I will talk about it, maybe,
But the walkthrough, I think, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
do you think maybe like later in the spring when some stuff is happening?
Whenever you guys would like to do it,
When
I'm
the
happy to.
playground thaws and we can.
Or in the fall.
Or in the
when
fall
it's-
when it's
In the
done.
fall when
Yeah,
it's
well,
done,
maybe both.
yeah.
Yeah, because we may have an opportunity in the fall to make decisions about spare funds.
Timing wise, none of this stuff is going away, so the issues aren't gonna change. So the more time you have to think about them and trying to prioritize those pieces.
And having walked through with Andrew, it's a different experience because he's so knowledgeable about
Right.
buildings. So
Right.
you see it through a different lens.
And then Libby went through with the fire marshal, chief, fire chief, and police chief.
No, it was not Matt. and I
Tony
think-
didn't join us for that. But, yeah, absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Great, we'll make sure that happens, maybe even, maybe in the spring and the fall. Any further discussion on that, or can we have a motion to approve the bid approval?
I move to approve the award of the contract to EF Wall.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next we have, and this will be Michelle. Michelle and Andrew to talk about lead. Just kind of note to the board, you might want to, and this is, there's a link on Orca, maybe send this around on some social media.
Yes, we'll
compare
pull up the
us
website just to
to-
show.
Yeah, so they can, view this in case they want further information on what, they have some questions and we don't have.
So, we wanted to invite Michelle Thompson down here, and I'll let Michelle introduce herself. Last time we talked, we kind of just gave an overview of where we were and kind of what we were trying to do. From there, we started to just develop a strategy to deal with, until the legislature comes up with more specifics that we can follow. We wanted to come up with a strategy that we could communicate with the public as to what we're doing to reduce lead exposure to students. And we thought it would be a great idea to share this with you guys, so as you were saying, you could share it with the public. And Michelle could answer any specific questions that you had, or general questions about where we are within the state and the schools, as well as what we're doing here. So I'll let Michelle introduce herself.
Sure.
Go from there.
So I'm Michelle Thompson. I'm the public health industrial hygienist with the health department. And one of my capacities is environmental health work with schools. So I've been helping here with the Montpelier-Roxbury School District and their efforts to do the lead in drinking water testing.
And the radon testing.
And radon testing, yeah.
So as, Michelle, why don't you give a little sort of lead in drinking water and sort of where standards are, and just to give us a context of where we are in the state and sort of in this flux from 15 parts per billion down to 1 to now potentially 3 with the state, to sort of.
Sure. So lead in drinking water is regulated in a couple different ways depending on your building and who's served and how many students are served and whether it's a municipal water source or a well. So schools that are on their own well and serve 25 or more people, they're required to do some lead testing as part of the lead and copper rule, which the Department of Environmental Conservation regulates. And municipal water systems are required to do some testing for the same same rule. But again, it's just a portion of taps, and schools that are on a municipal water system aren't being tested inside the school because the lead and copper rule requires testing at residences. So they're doing the testing in residential settings and not inside the school building. The action level that they use for those public water systems is 15 parts per billion. It's not a health-based level. It's based on treatment effectiveness and based on economic feasibility. So that's the level that they use. They require action to be taken for any taps that are above 15 parts per billion. The American Academy of Pediatric and the health department, we have a health advisory level of 1 part per billion. So we would recommend that taps not exceed 1 part per billion, and that is a health protective value because there is no safe level of lead in the body, and so as low as you can get it is what's recommended. And the reason it's not 0 is because labs have different reporting limits, and the health department lab's reporting limit is 1 part per billion. So basically we're saying we recommend being as low as a lab is going to report to you. They won't report anything less than 1.
So we, and stop me when you need me to. So we got into this from a parent who had asked us about if we had done any lead testing, and I said no, and we asked Libby and said, let's do it. And so we did, and 150 test results later. And the state's coming out with their own soon, their own rules and regulations on this, probably within the next, probably this year, is the guess. They've got things written, but whether it's going to be implemented or not, because there's still a lot to do. So we went through, and as I say, we've tested about 150, or taken about 150 tests. And in conversations with you and the public and Libby and myself, we came to the conclusion that, barring having the state tell us, giving us the guidance, that, and talking with Michelle, that really our best bet is let's go to the 1 part per billion or less. And the best place to do that after doing our testing is direct people to filtered bottle stations, which we have throughout the buildings. And that's what we have done. So every sink has a sign above it that says one of a couple of things. It says use the bottle fill stations. That's in all the classrooms. All the classroom sinks, they have those signs. We, they're signs. They're laminated signs. So I've talked to the custodial staff and said, hey, if you need more, if they're not there, make sure you let us know and we'll get them up. But trying to set a culture of sending the kids to the drinking fountains. In kitchens, we have either tested and know that they're down to the 1 part per billion or less. We've put a no restriction sign up. If we've got a fixture that is a little higher at the initial draw but is fine in the flush, we've got a purge for 30 second sign, or we've got a did I say the no restrictions? These are the no restrictions, or a purge. So that's where we are with the kitchens. In home ec rooms, we've put filters on all the home ec rooms. And NSF, is that what it is?
Yes.
NSF rated filters on all the taps, figuring you're not going to take your pot of water down to the sink, down to the bubbler to get water. And we've done that for all the nurses' offices as well, except Roxbury, where they tested it below the limit. That's generally where we are. What we've done is we've come up with this strategy. This is a work in progress, and until the state comes out with something a little more specific, this is what we are doing as a district. So we're directing all students and faculty to use, and visitors to use the bottle fill stations. Any fixture that's above 15 parts per billion, we immediately took out of service. I'm gonna go show you the numbers here in a moment. Any fixture that's redundant, an old unfiltered drinking fountain that's 10 feet away from a new bottle fill station, we've taken out of service. An old sink that's in a closet, and you'd be amazed at how many sinks there are in closets in this district, we just shut the water off. Again, installed filters at all the nurses' offices, installed filters at all the student cooking facilities. In the kitchens, again, we have made sure that all those have the appropriate sign as to what they can use. Ideally, we'd like to have the kitchens, no restrictions. And we are working towards that. We have been, I'll talk a little bit about that, the sort of remediation steps that we've been taking. Post-all sinks, we're going to implement a strategy of any fixture that is tested above 1 part per billion that we've taken out of use for drinking. We are going to start replacing those fixtures and valves. Really, you gotta go down. If the fixture had lead in it, which our testing kind of indicates that our any fixture that is a problem, it's because of the fixture, not the pipes within the building. But we gotta go down to the valves, which means we have to shut off the water in the building. Even in this building, that's a nerve-wracking thing to do. So we haven't done that at UES or Main Street because you don't mess with the plumbing when the kids are in there, because the valves don't get exercised. You turn them once, and we could have big trouble. So we're being a little bit cautious there on those, but they're on the schedule at the appropriate time to replace those fixtures. We're gonna continue testing as needed and work with Michelle. We're gonna continue to communicate our strategy and our goals with parents. We've got a webpage which I'm gonna show you guys so you can communicate out to folks, where we're putting all this information so folks can find it. And then the last piece is going to be, as I say, once the state comes up with their regulations, we will follow those as a minimum. The state, it appears, is gonna have a 3 part per billion limit for drinking water. So that'll be a further discussion, but we're gonna stick with the 1 for now. And the one piece that is a little bit, that we talked with Michelle about was lead can't get through this. You use it for washing dishes and washing your hands.
Yep.
And so we kind of early on made that compromise that you gotta have water. You gotta, especially in the elementary schools, the kids need to be able to wash their hands. So that's why we made the conscious decision to leave those sinks active.
And that's where the signage comes into play, and just changing the culture around where people are used to drinking from. So if it gets in the teacher's mindset that, okay, we're not using this for drinking and cooking, we're only using this for hand washing, and then that just becomes the norm.
Yeah. And it's being on the front edge here, it's scary that, we're putting up signs telling our users that the water's poison. Well, it's not necessarily, but it's within the limits of what's allowable. So I think after a year or two or a couple years of doing this, we're not gonna be the only buildings. Any public building you go into is gonna have signage like that in it. That's gonna direct you to the drinking fountains. So what we've done with regard to any questions? Oh, good.
Sorry, you guys are doing amazing with this complex situation, but what I wonder is that the public water supply only has to meet a 15 parts per billion standard. So how can we be held to a lower standard? Do we know what the incoming water lead level is?
I would say by our flush test, we kind of do.
Your flush tests might be a little bit too short. 30 seconds probably doesn't get you outside of the building, but you could certainly check in with the water, whatever the water district is, and see what their results are showing. When we did a pilot last school year, with 16 schools, we did a 10-minute flush, just to answer that question, and we didn't find any detection in any of those 2-minute flush samples. They were all down less than 1 part per
They were all
million.
less than one. Well, that's
Yeah.
good.
And that maybe is not a good
That's another
generalization
community,
across
right.
the state,
Right.
but
Yeah.
what we saw was that the water being supplied typically is okay.
I mean,
It's the
fact that
pipes and
some of
chemical
our
thing.
taps are below 1 is a
Most.
good, that most are below 1, is a good indication of the quality of Montpelier's water, but I just think we need to bear in mind that we don't know the level of the incoming water, and it seems like a lot to ask to fix that problem if there is one.
Is there any way for incoming water to shed lead, if you will, as it comes out? Most of our fountains, for example, are less than 1 part per billion. Is there any way that the water supply coming in could be greater than that in terms of lead content?
Typically what happens is the water comes in and lead gets into the water through contact with the pipes and fixtures and solder. So it's actually, the water is acquiring lead as it moves
Right.
through,
Well,
not
unless
necessarily.
it drops, except at points where it drops sediment out of it.
Yeah.
Andrew, since the signage is so important, can we assume that all the signage is age appropriate in each of the buildings?
They do have pictures, which was one of the things that the health department was pretty big on making sure was included in signage, because obviously if it's just words and it's in a classroom where there's, pre-K or young kids, that would be helpful. So there's pictures of like a water bottle with the do not, the no sign.
The one sign I didn't bring. I'll have to go, I can go get the one, I've got one
Or
in
in
the
the
office.
bathroom right over there. Bathroom across the hall.
Yeah, there's one in the bathroom across.
Here, I'll get it.
And there's similar ones. There's a water bottle. There's a cup.
I used the one that you
There's
sent out.
yes, hand washing.
I agree that one of the things I think we should do next year is we do need to go away, I think we should go away from the laminated sign. I think we need to get a plaque. Something that's fastened to the cabinets or the walls, or something that we know is gonna stay. But,
I wonder if we could color code some of the ones at the elementary school level.
and that was certainly a concern that parents brought to us, is, you're asking, the kids to make that decision of what's right and what's, is this okay for me? So absolutely.
Actually, once they're accustomed to it, they'll follow the rules, so it's just, this time around, we need to, so the teachers need to say, no, you fill up your water bottle there, and then they'll do it automatically.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of actual uses, obviously you can't
Yes,
have
they
real
will.
good data on this, but kind of anecdotally, it seems like the places where you're asking people to fill up water, probably the places where most of the drinking was occurring from prior to, were some of the sinks that had levels below 1 frequently used for drinking or consumption?
Yeah, I would say so. They were, the biggest issue, and Michelle can speak to this in more detail, the biggest issues we had were faucets that were put in either in the late 80s, early 90s, when the lead laws were sort of coming in, but not quite hammer tight yet. And it depends on the type of fixture. Bubblers, so down at Roxbury, they had sinks that had bubblers on them, little side bubblers. Well, the way that's configured is the water sits in the bubbler, and the packing is a little bit different. So the bubbler tested high, but the fixture didn't. So on the same sink, you got 2 different readings. So right now, the highest priority will be, and once we can get control of the building, and I would love to be able to say, hey, we can do this tomorrow, but we can't mess with we shouldn't mess with the water system down UES in the middle of the winter when we've got things going on. UES, there's about four sinks at UES that were part of the later addition, part of that late 80s, 90 addition. There's one sink at Roxbury, and again, you can't really tell because the sinks at Roxbury were all installed basically at the same time, and 4 out of 5 of them are within the limits, and there's one that's not. Why that one isn't, who knows? But we've been able to identify it. So on the district sorry.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, it's a recent thing, water bottles. So before that, we had drinking fountains, people went to drinking fountains. When water bottles came in, then you stuck them under any faucet that worked. There was a change, and that's been relatively recent.
Yeah.
What is your plan for retesting to check?
Sure. So on the district web page, if you go to if folks, you can direct folks who have questions, the central office page, under facilities, we have posted, this is a little different than I'm used to, so bear with me. Oh, my guy. So we have a couple sections in here, and we're you're gonna see more and more information as it goes through, because we're gonna have our lead information here, we're gonna have asbestos notifications. This is gonna be the clearinghouse for information. But under right and immediately, you have all the correspondence and presentations that we've done to date for lead, and we as well as have our strategy for the handout I just gave you. So if the public has any questions about what we're doing and how we're doing it, they can come here. What we've also put on here is we have got a live spreadsheet where folks can go in and look at the results for all the different schools and where we are with them. So, I am, as we go through, are dating, this is really tough. So, the room name, the room number, the location, if it's this is the home ec room at, or Family Consumer Science. At Main Street Middle School. Let's go back to the picture of the old guy. Explain that. We've got southwest. We got a sink in the southwest corner. We've got one in the southwest corner. We've got these different. And so what we have here is we have the date that the test was taken. So we have our first draw, the date of the first draw, the date of our flush test, and the results. So we can see here, this was the drinking fountain. We tested fine. We don't need to test again. Again, I think the state may tell us what cycle we may want to test on. That hasn't been determined yet.
No, that hasn't been determined yet.
So here, I'm just going to pull this out. This is a sink in the Family Consumer Science classroom. So we first tested on November 2nd. Our first draw was 3 parts per billion. Our flush was less than 1 part per billion. On the January 7th, after having these discussions of where we are, at this time we were still thinking the 15 parts per billion. We're in good shape. On the 7th, we took that fixture offline. We shut it down because it was above the 1. We actually, on this fixture, we actually took the screen, the aerator out of the fixture. We retested it, and it came down to 2 parts per billion. So these remediation steps are you kind of take you do the easy fixed first. This is before we start replacing fixtures and valves. We took the aerator, got it down to 1 part per 2 parts per billion. On the 17th, when we got those results back, we decided that, we're going to put filters on all the home ec, Family Consumer Science fixtures. So we installed that. We have not retested that. That is, we've installed an NSF approved filter that has a monitor on it that will blink when it says the filter needs to be changed. The custodial staff has, I loaded them up with a bunch of spare filters, so that fixture hasn't been we don't feel the need to retest that one.
What is the cost so far of this work?
Ballpark, a few grand.
A few grand?
We get about,
The test kits
$12 a
themselves are
pop.
$12 a piece. So that's like if you're taking one first draw sample, it's $12. If you're taking a flush sample at the same tap, it would be $24.
so it's like $1,800 in testing, the time to run them up. And then the remediation work, we've replaced a bunch of fixtures. We've had the plumber come in and redo the plumbing supply lines back to kind of cobbled together at the high school, but we've brought that back. And so $3,000 to $5,000.
For a school that didn't have a huge amount of problems, or for a district.
Yeah.
A relatively small district at that.
Yeah.
So let's just stick with, so
That's so far.
this is how we've been doing this, is sort of letting folks know when we're doing stuff, what the results are, what our next step is, and then like this fountain, the east drinking fountain in the lower level corridor. It was old, it was redundant, we took it out of service.
A question specifically about the middle school.
Sure.
I've been hearing that there's not ready access to a drinking fountain in the gym or by the gym
It's broken.
anymore.
Yeah, that one's, they've ordered a new one.
Okay.
They've ordered a new one, yeah.
Great.
So let's just, so that's where the information, if folks have questions, everything we're doing, when we're doing it, and what the step is. The state will have its own reporting matrix here soon enough that we can follow. So if we go through the district, I went through, and keeping in mind that we're still directing everyone to the bottle fill stations. If the state came and said 3 parts per billion, and you decided, we as a community, whoever the decision makers are, say 3 parts per billion, we can live with that. That's what we're going to do with the district. At Roxbury, that constitutes 2 fixtures that we need to get in there and replace. And again, we're fortunate in that the first draw, so here's a good example. This was a classroom. One of the classrooms that we tested, the bubbler came in at 9. We took it offline. We had the bubbler, we had the plumber go in and take the bubbler off. We tested at the sink this time. So we have a high reading at that sink. So that fixture needs to be taken out and replaced, probably down the valve, same thing with that one. Here, again, once we were down to that one part on the flush, that really isn't gonna change, so we didn't test flushes. If the flushes were below the 1 part per billion, we presumed that nothing was gonna change over the coming weeks, so we kept with that. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. You know, we went from 3 parts per billion to less than 1 part per billion. But that was actually a different sink. This was the faucet aspect of that same sink. So we got 2 sinks down at Roxbury that we're gonna be replacing. And that would get us to that 3 part per billion throughout the entire school. Again, if that's the standard, that's further discussion on that one. UES, again, using that 3 part, we've got 1 down there. There's about 3 other ones that we want to take care of to get us down to the 1 part per billion. Main Street, right now, I believe that all of them are below the 3. Again, we've got some that were, and then the high school's in good shape. So here's another good example at the high school. So this sink, this was a brand new fixture. that tested 2 parts per billion. We went in, we flushed it, we took the aerator out of it, we retested it. 2 months later, it was down to the 1 part per billion. But even though it was the 1 part per billion, we said, you know, these tests are a snapshot in time. It's a cooking, it's used for cooking, let's put a filter on it and be done with it. We're not gonna, we don't want people guessing what's what, we just want to know. So I'm happy to go into more detail with people, but I think I'm probably confusing people, but the important part is that the information's there and we're dating it, and we're heading towards the goals on that piece.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's very,
Thank you.
very helpful. Thanks for coming, Michelle.
Sure. Thank you. It's the work that you guys are doing is really good. You know, this is all proactive, and there isn't legislation right now requiring it, but it's really great to see schools taking it seriously and addressing issues.
Okay. No, well,
Maybe that table on the website is fantastic, very transparent, and
Yeah, and
it'd be
it's
really,
yeah.
and Mike Berry was very helpful in that anytime I make a change in there, it automatically updates it, so it is the latest information that we have.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you to everyone
Thank you.
for this. It's a great thing.
In terms of a plan to articulate this to the community, what are we thinking there?
I heard we were supposed to post it on Facebook.
Okay,
Should this go out?
sounds,
That's on the webpage.
Don't.
I probably just making the community know that it's there.
Maybe it would help if each of the principals in their letters would note that it's there on the website. It's been done in each school.
A link to the website in the principal email.
That
Yep.
would be good, yeah.
yep.
There's the
Yeah.
stuff.
Can we tweet it out too?
You can tweet away.
I mean, can the district tweet it out?
Yes.
That's Mike Berry, right?
Yes.
And you can tweet it out.
Thank you very much.
I will tweet that, okay?
Easy for you to say.
Radon?
What's that?
Radon?
We talk a little bit about radon.
It's on our agenda, so.
We've done the testing. So we did testing at all 4 schools for radon as well. We had some unfortunate issues with the lab that we use where samples didn't get analyzed quickly enough. So we only have about half of the results for Union, Roxbury, and Main Street, Middle, and then we have, I don't know, just a handful from the high school. But what we saw for the results that we do have for Union, Roxbury, and Main Street is that radon levels were down around background levels, so what radon levels are in outdoor air, which is perfect, so that's really good. The few results that we have from the high school are similar. There was one room that had a result that was in the area where we would recommend considering doing some follow-up testing, but nothing above 4 picocuries per liter, which is the recommended action level for fixing a radon problem. It's definitely worth trying to get the rest of the tests done. Sometimes in a school it really is just one room that has an issue. It's not necessarily building wide. So it's good to have a full set of results, and we're working on what the best plan is to go about finishing that up so you guys can have a full set of results. But what we're seeing so far is looking good.
And we'll do the same thing. I'll work with Mike to make this, I think we should make this information a little easier for people to find, and we'll start breaking these down into subcategories so they can, once we have the radon testing, we'll discuss this. Like I say, all the reporting stuff that needs to take place, hopefully we can have there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And don't be shy about questions, or if anyone has any questions. Michelle's been fabulously helpful in working, getting us through this. So we're happy to answer the best we can.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. It's important stuff.
Good. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good night.
So our third reading of the equity policy is up next. I know Andrew has at least one.
I do, but I think it's resolved now by the clean copy, because I was looking at a copy that was like 2 or 3 times ago.
Okay.
And there was something that,
is the one that Brian and
yeah, and looking at it at the beginning of this, which I unfortunately didn't have a chance to look at the clean version before, but I did read the dirty version, if you will, for like the 5th or 6th time. And I just want to clarify something, but I think that this is clarified. Seeing it in this format, it seems very clear. With regard to the assessment under expectations for district administration, the language about the district will systematically gather and use data disaggregated by race, ethnicity, language, etc. Is the intent of that so that we can collect data based on these demographic fields to ensure that we're meeting our goals within the equity policy? Is that the aim of that?
Yes, I would say that was the original intention.
Because here it seems clear that is it, and there was something, I think there might have been something in an old one, I don't know what it was, I don't want to misspeak, but there was something that threw me off and made me think that the language was doing the contrary of that, and I was concerned that if we didn't have that type of data, there wouldn't be a way for us to evaluate and hold ourselves, the district, accountable with this policy. So, but seeing it clean like this, I don't have that same concern anymore, so.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments or questions? And thanks again, policy committee for.
I would say, we didn't catch it before it came out this time, but there was a slight grammatical change. The second paragraph, description, there's one sentence that is in italics, that the italics should be removed. Students should not bear that burden was italicized.
Sorry, Ron.
Totally mine. Yeah, like I said.
You said that. I did not get anything back from the students on this, so I think that they were fine with as written.
We're really busy.
Could be too. They went out a few different ways, so. So it can be warned for adoption, the next meeting?
Great. No other comments?
I will,
No, except great job.
Yeah, great job.
to everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, students. Libby.
We don't have,
I'm really glad
the
that
students are in the
board-
academic
well,
year, right?
the
They're not in the
students,
same
board, the
election
district
cycle that we
is
are,
moving
right?
forward with this, I think it's really
Right.
important.
So they're just not here tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were busy.
I thought they started in the fall, but.
We used to be able to find bits of it in, just dispersed in other policies, but it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a better statement as is.
Which one?
So what do we do? Do we have to approve this and then it waits 10 days and then
We don't have to.
we don't have to do
We don't
it?
have to take a vote now, but
But it has
we
to.
do have
be-
to, we seem to have consensus that we will approve it next time, so it needs to be warned.
Warned
Yep.
or
We'll
adopted.
make sure that happens
Days
next time.
Perfect.
Should it be on the consent agenda, or do
Yep.
we just?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it on
Yep.
the consent agenda. Okay. Great, so next item is, executive session for the evaluation of personnel, so.
Is it?
There's no negotiations for that?
Yeah, I feel
Oh,
like
we need
we should
negotiations.
probably put like
Update on status.
Yep.
5 minutes of negotiation.
Oh, you know, there's one other item I wanna add before we, with the change to the way the healthcare is bargained, there's been a deal worked out where every school district or SU district gets a vote through the VSBA to approve the deal. So we need a rep VSBA rep who would basically monitor, the talks and figure out what's going on, and then vote whether or not we want to approve that statewide healthcare agreement.
Could we?
It's not just floor, like we have to send someone from our board, we can't just.
Yep.
So where is this occurring?
Yeah, every SU and school district gets one vote as part of that.
So we get one vote to decide how the VSBA votes, or,
I think so.
so it's,
So
the
we're voting,
VSBA
we're
has to vote
ratifying whatever.
Yeah,
on
the
the
VSBA has to
negotiating
vote on
team, we're voting
Yeah.
To tell them.
Tell them.
how
To tell them
to
how to vote.
So do you have
And
any
then-
clarity on what that means? Does that mean,
No.
as Andrew was just saying, show up at one meeting and have monitored it ahead of time, or does this show up for 50 meetings along the way?
You want me to read the request?
Yes,
From
please.
memory, it didn't seem.
Under the process approved at the 2018 VSBA annual meeting, each SU/SD has the ability to cast one vote to ratify the agreement reached by the statewide healthcare bargaining commission. So
Ratify the
it's-
agreement, that sounds like an after.
It tells,
Yes.
so it's instructing this board, please be sure to add appointment of the SD's voting delegate for statewide health insurance to the first meeting of your SD board, as the ratification process requires each SD to notify the VSBA of the name, telephone number, and email address of its voting delegate by April 1st. If the commission enters into an agreement, the VSBA will host an informational webinar for the voting delegates within 10 calendar days after execution of the agreement. Within 10 calendar days after the informational webinar, the VSBA shall conduct an electronic ballot.
So it sounds like it sounds like it can be a pretty light lift.
It's like they make an agreement, we watch a webinar.
And then you electronically vote.
Assume that.
And
I'll
is
do-
it,
I'll do it.
Yeah.
and is it passed if the majority of people vote yes? What's the voting process?
Sounds like.
My guess is that is probably, we probably obtain that information, we don't have it right now.
But we will also, I would assume, have to have a board meeting after the webinar, between the webinar and the
To
vote,
decide
so
how we're
that
gonna
we
vote,
can.
yeah.
that was my question, does anyone
Yeah.
just decide or do we?
No, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, but
Yeah, he's a representative
Yeah.
of the board, he's
I think,
not
I think he has to
independently,
come tell us what he learned
Yeah.
in the webinar, and then.
and we vote.
we could do an ad hoc, like,
Yeah.
web-based meeting.
We
if
could
it
all,
doesn't
we could
fall.
all meet somewhere and watch the webinar.
You never
Yeah.
know, it
No,
might
no,
fall
that's
into
what
the
we're
right
doing
calendar
too. No, you don't know the timeline on this,
Yeah.
so.
Should we have an alternate, just like, say, for example, or do we just cross that bridge when we come to it? But say, for example, it happened to come when
You're
You were in
aware.
Bermuda or
I'm
something.
away or something. I don't have any big.
Yeah, we could probably, if you're not gonna be there, you can let us know, and
Yeah.
we can appoint an alternate at a later time, but, I think the important thing right now is getting the contact information to
Yeah.
the VSBA before the April 1 deadline, and it's either this meeting or the next meeting, so.
I'll do it as the other board member on the negotiations committee who isn't the parliamentarian and isn't on a third committee.
I move that the board appoint Andrew as our voting delegate for the VSBA healthcare
We'll call it that
ratification.
for now.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Now executive session, and so you want us to add
Yeah.
negotiations, so we need a,
Motion to enter executive session to discuss.
so we need a, that would be in the.
I move that we find that discussing negotiations in public would put the district at substantial disadvantage.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now. we
I
could-
move that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations and evaluation of personnel.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. So we
So
should
is
go.
that like boilerplate language?